A millionaire discovers an abandoned child on his mansion's doorstep. What he uncovers next is even more shocking. Henry came home earlier than usual that evening. It had been a long day at the office, but all he wanted was to spend some time with his wife, Jessica. As he stepped inside, he placed his keys on the entryway table and heard the sound of running water from the bathroom. Jessica was in the shower. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm home. How are you?" he called out as he headed toward their bedroom. "I'm good, love. Just finishing up in here. I'll be right out," Jessica replied from the bathroom, her voice calm and carefree. Walking into their room, Henry noticed something that caught his eye. A drawer on their dresser was slightly ajar. It was a small detail, but his curiosity piqued when he saw the edge of what looked like an old notebook sticking out. It was something he didn't remember seeing before. With a mix of curiosity and unease, he approached the drawer and gently pulled it open. Inside was a journal, clearly Jessica's. Henry wasn't the type to snoop, but there was something about the way it had been left there, a bit out of place, that compelled him to take a closer look. As he opened it, a folded piece of paper slipped out from between the pages. He picked it up almost instinctively, unfolded it, and what he read left him stunned. A medical receipt for a gynecological procedure in Jessica's name. It was for the insertion of a 5-year contraceptive implant. The date on the receipt was what struck him the most. It was from just a few days after their honeymoon. Henry's heart raced. What did this mean? They had been trying to have a child for years, or at least that's what he thought. Whenever he brought up the topic of starting a family, Jessica always seemed to deflect the conversation, but he never imagined there could be a hidden reason behind it. He carefully placed the receipt back into the journal and closed the drawer just in time to hear Jessica step out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel. "Hi, love," she said with an easy smile, planting a quick kiss on his cheek. "How was your day?" Henry masked his thoughts, though his mind was racing with the revelation he had just stumbled upon. "It was fine," he said, trying to sound normal. "Just a little tired." As Jessica began getting dressed, Henry sat silently on the edge of the bed, struggling to make sense of what he'd found. It was hard for him to believe that she had made such a significant decision so soon after their wedding without telling him. She had been pretending this whole time, deliberately avoiding the idea of building a family together. He couldn't stop the sinking feeling in his chest as he tried to process the implications of her secret. Jessica calmly brushed her hair, unaware of the thoughts racing through her husband's mind. Henry Reynolds, a humble man from a prominent family in the city, had always followed in his father's business footsteps. His life was defined by family expectations, and since marrying Jessica, he had dreamed of the day they could start a family of their own. They had discussed having children early in their relationship. She always seemed agreeable, yet there was always an excuse, trips, commitments, or the idea that the timing wasn't right. Now, 5 years into their marriage, Henry began to suspect that Jessica had never intended to fulfill those plans. Why had she chosen a long-term contraceptive right after their wedding? What did that mean for their relationship? And what else could she be hiding? As Jessica finished getting dressed and began her nightly routine at the mirror, Henry realized he couldn't confront her without knowing more. He needed to understand just how deeply the deception ran. Jessica turned to him with a smile, as if everything was fine, as if nothing was amiss. That smile cut Henry deeply. That night, while she slept beside him, he lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what other secrets she might be keeping. The next morning, the day started as usual. Jessica rose early, donned one of her expensive outfits, and headed to the gym like she did most mornings. "See you later, honey," she said with a quick kiss, and a cheerful smile before leaving, seemingly oblivious to Henry's inner turmoil. As she left, Henry retreated to his study, intending to review business reports, but he couldn't focus. The image of a receipt and its date replayed in his mind. He couldn't ignore the situation any longer. He had to dig deeper. Doubt gnawed at him until he decided to track Jessica's activities. Henry called his trusted driver, Caleb, a loyal man who had served the family for years. "Caleb, I need a favor," Henry said, his tone serious. "Keep an eye on where Jessica asks you to take her. Let me know if anything seems unusual. Don't raise any suspicion. I just need to know what's going on." Caleb didn't question the request. He had always respected Henry's privacy, but sensed something significant was troubling his employer. That same day, while Jessica was at the gym, Caleb called Henry. "Mr. Reynolds," Caleb said hesitantly, "Mrs. Jessica asked me to take her to a hotel after her workout. It seemed unusual. She stopped at the entrance and asked me to wait, but she didn't go to a room. She spoke to someone at the reception, but I couldn't tell who." Henry felt a chill run down his spine. It was unlike Jessica to visit a hotel without mentioning it. What was she hiding? The suspicion grew stronger, and Henry knew he had to see it for himself. "Stay there, Caleb," Henry instructed firmly. "I'm on my way." He rushed out of the house, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. The heavy traffic only added to his mounting anxiety. When he finally arrived, he parked a short distance from the hotel, careful to remain unseen. Walking into the lobby, Henry's heart pounded. He scanned the area and spotted Jessica in a corner, talking to a man. At first glance, the man seemed ordinary, but Henry's gut told him otherwise. He moved closer, staying out of sight, but near enough to catch part of their conversation. "Same time tomorrow?" The man, who turned out to be a gym trainer, asked casually. Jessica nodded with a knowing smile. Henry's chest tightened with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Jessica was betraying him. The woman he had built a life with, the person he trusted most, was lying to him in the most blatant way. Henry asked Caleb to discreetly follow Jessica and gather evidence the next day. Loyal as ever, Caleb carried out the request. Using a hidden camera, he recorded Jessica arriving at the hotel with her trainer, entering a room together, and hours later, leaving with shared laughter and conspiratorial smiles. The evidence was undeniable. Henry didn't confront Jessica right away. Instead, he decided to wait until their anniversary. Jessica had been planning a grand celebration for weeks, inviting friends and family, completely unaware of what Henry had uncovered. Meanwhile, Henry was preparing his own surprise for that evening, one she would never forget. The big day arrived. Jessica looked stunning, dressed in one of her finest outfits, basking in the attention of everyone at the party. Henry observed her from a distance, his expression calm, though a storm raged inside him. His plan was set, and the moment of truth was approaching. During dinner, as the guests raised their glasses to toast 5 years of marriage, Jessica stood up with her own glass in hand, smiling brightly. She thanked everyone for being there and spoke about how lucky she felt to have Henry by her side. Henry, swallowing hard, waited for his cue. "And now, to make this moment even more special, I'd like to share a video that takes us back to one of the happiest days of our lives," Henry announced, his smile masking the turmoil beneath. "Our wedding day." The guests clapped, excited to see the video. The lights dimmed and a large screen lit up. At first, the video was just as expected, scenes of Jessica walking down the aisle, radiant and smiling. But suddenly, the footage shifted. The laughter in the room faded as an entirely different video appeared. It showed Jessica entering a hotel while wearing gym gear and with a man who many people immediately recognized as her trainer. The footage clearly captured them walking to the front desk, laughing and speaking closely. The scene then cut to them in the hallway, heading into a hotel room together. As the door closed behind them, the video ended abruptly. A wave of confusion swept through the room. Jessica sat frozen, her face pale, and her mind racing for an explanation. The guests looked at her, stunned and waiting for answers, but she couldn't utter a single word. Her hands trembled, and her vision blurred with panic. Henry stood, picking up the microphone to address the room. Breaking the silence, he said, "I'm sorry, everyone. What you just saw was no mistake. This video is a glimpse of the reality I've been living with for the past few months." His voice was calm but icy. Turning to Jessica, he continued, "I can no longer stay with a woman who has lied to me, deceived me, and betrayed my trust. I refuse to live with someone like you. You're a cheater," he declared, his words hitting like a hammer. Jessica's eyes welled up with tears as she tried to approach him. "Henry, please, don't do this," she begged, her voice cracking. But he stepped back, avoiding her. "There's no turning back," Henry said firmly, addressing the room once more. "I want a divorce. As of tonight, our relationship is over." Without waiting for a response, he placed the microphone down, left the party, and drove away, leaving Jessica to face the crushing weight of public humiliation. The guests were stunned. No one could believe what had just unfolded. Jessica's tears couldn't undo the damage, and the fallout began immediately. In the days that followed, news of the dramatic anniversary party spread like wildfire. Jessica, publicly disgraced, made several attempts to reconcile with Henry, but he refused to listen to her apologies or excuses. Henry, despite his calm exterior, wrestled with a storm of emotions, hurt and anger, but he stayed resolute. The divorce papers were signed, and he was determined to move forward with his life. Months after their separation, something completely unexpected happened. One late evening, Henry was returning home after a long day at work. As he approached the gates of his estate, a faint but desperate sound reached his ears. It was the cry of a baby. "Do you hear that?" Henry asked Caleb, his driver. "Yes, sir. It's coming from outside," Caleb replied, turning toward the sound. Both men stepped out of the car and walked toward the source of the crying. At the entrance to the mansion, they found a small box placed on the ground. Inside, a baby, wrapped in a blanket, wailed helplessly. Kneeling down, Henry gently lifted the infant, his heart overwhelmed with a mix of emotions. Henry's heart raced as he clutched the baby close. How had this happened? Beside the infant was a crumpled note scrawled on a piece of paper. "I can't take care of him right now. I know he'll be better off with you." Henry stared in disbelief. Who had left the baby there? And why had they chosen him? "Someone must be nearby," Henry said, still in shock, as Caleb scanned the grounds. Caleb darted in every direction but found no one. The baby had been abandoned right at the mansion's entrance without anyone noticing. Carrying the infant into the house, Henry's mind was a whirlwind of questions. What did this mean? This tiny child had entered his life in the most unexpected way, and while Henry had no idea what to do, there was something about the baby's innocent gaze that deeply moved him. "Caleb, first thing tomorrow, I want you to investigate if there's any information about an abandoned baby in the area. I need to know who this child is and why they were left here," Henry instructed, his eyes never leaving the baby. The baby, now in the arms of Megan, the housekeeper, continued to cry softly as she gently rocked him, trying to soothe him. Henry couldn't stop thinking about the note. Who is this baby's mother? He wondered. What could have driven her to leave her child like this? The words on the note echoed in his mind, so simple, yet filled with so much pain. I know he'll be better off with you." The sound of the baby's cries filled the otherwise silent mansion, tugging at Henry's heart. "Caleb, go to the nearest store and buy everything this baby might need. Diapers, clothes, formula, bottles, everything. Don't spare any expense," Henry said firmly, his voice calm but resolute. Caleb nodded without hesitation, quickly heading out into the night, aware that his boss was facing something completely unfamiliar. Once the door closed, Henry stepped toward Megan. Without thinking twice, he extended his arms. "Let me hold him, Megan. I want to try." Megan carefully passed the baby to him, and as soon as Henry cradled the infant in his arms, something shifted. The baby's tiny eyes opened slowly, locking onto his face. Those dark, curious eyes seemed to search for comfort, for safety. In that moment, Henry felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years. Holding this baby reminded him of what he had always longed for: a family, a child to love, protect, and guide. A dream that Jessica, who had deceived him in their marriage and refused to have children, had destroyed. But now, in the most unexpected way, a connection, a sense of paternal love began to take root. He couldn't explain it, but Henry felt as though this baby had chosen him just as he was beginning to feel an unshakable bond with the child. Slowly, the baby's cries quieted. Henry sat down on the living room sofa, holding the baby close against his chest. "It's okay, little one," he whispered softly, his voice barely audible. "Everything will be all right." The baby gazed up at him, as if trying to understand his words. From the corner of the room, Megan watched the scene unfold, a faint smile on her face. She could see that this child had come into Henry's life at a pivotal moment. Though she didn't fully grasp what it meant, she noticed a light return to her employer's eyes. Before long, Caleb returned, his arms loaded with bags of supplies, diapers, tiny clothes, and a freshly prepared bottle of formula. "Here you go, sir," he said, offering the bottle. "The store clerk recommended this for a baby his age." Megan quickly warmed the bottle and handed it to Henry, who carefully offered it to the baby. The infant latched on eagerly, drinking with a hunger that made Henry smile. Watching the baby eat, Henry couldn't help but feel a sense of joy. He'd always wanted to be a father, and though this child wasn't his by blood, his heart told him there was a reason the baby had entered his life. As the baby finished the bottle, his tiny eyes never left Henry's face. The connection between them, though inexplicable, felt undeniable. Henry's heart opened in a way he hadn't experienced before. There was no anger, no betrayal, only a profound sense of peace as he cradled the baby in his arms. Once the baby was full, Henry gently rested him on his shoulder, patting his small back until he let out a soft burp. With tenderness he never knew he possessed, Henry rose and began pacing the living room, rocking the baby gently as he yawned, slowly succumbing to sleep. "You are everything I've ever wanted, little one. I never imagined this moment would come in such an unexpected way," Henry whispered as he continued walking. "But who are you? Where did you come from?" The questions circled in his mind, yet one thing was clear. Fate had dealt him an unforeseen card. As he gently placed the baby into a makeshift crib Megan had prepared, Henry realized his life had taken an unexpected turn. He wasn't sure how to handle it yet, but in that moment, with the baby peacefully sleeping in his mansion, he knew there was no going back. This little soul, who had arrived in the most unpredictable way, filled a void Henry hadn't even known existed. "Welcome home, little one," he murmured, before switching off the lights. In the quiet darkness of the night, for the first time in years, Henry felt at peace. As the sun began to stream through the mansion's curtains, filling the room with warm morning light, Henry awoke. It had been a restless night of feeding the baby every 3 hours, leaving him with a swirl of emotions and scattered thoughts. The baby slept soundly in the makeshift crib beside him, blissfully unaware of the chaos his arrival had caused in Henry's life. Watching him sleep, Henry pondered his next steps. Should he call the authorities? It was the logical, responsible thing to do. But the mere thought of handing the baby over filled him with unease. He didn't know where the child came from or why he had been left at his door. But what he did know was that he felt an inexplicable bond. When the baby stirred, slowly opening his eyes, their gazes met again, and Henry felt his resolve crumble entirely. He couldn't let him go. "Good morning, little one," Henry murmured with a soft smile, moving closer to the crib. "Are you hungry?" As if understanding him, the baby wriggled impatiently, letting out small whimpers. At that moment, Megan entered the room, holding a ready bottle. "Sir, here you go. It's all set," she said, handing it to him with a warm, maternal smile. Without hesitation, Henry took the bottle and offered it to the baby. The little one eagerly latched onto it, drinking with determination, and Henry couldn't take his eyes off him. "Megan, I think I'll stay home with him today," Henry said after a moment. "I need time to figure out what to do." Megan nodded, her expression understanding. "I understand, sir. This child has entered your life in such an unexpected way. But it seems like there's something special connecting you to him." Henry didn't respond right away. He simply continued feeding the baby, feeling the invisible bond between them grow stronger with each passing moment. When the baby finished the bottle, he gazed up at Henry with innocent eyes, as if knowing Henry was his protector. The entire day, Henry stayed home, caring for the baby and savoring his presence. Every time he held him, the weight of his looming decisions seemed lighter. But as night fell, reality began to creep in. He couldn't do this alone, forever. His business required his attention, and though he could work from home, he needed help. That evening, seated in his study, Henry reflected quietly. He couldn't ignore the situation. The baby needed constant care. And while Megan was doing her best, he knew he couldn't add more to her workload. She already had enough on her plate to manage the household. Looking out over the dark gardens of his mansion, Henry made up his mind. He would call his personal assistant Brenda the next day and ask her to find someone trustworthy and experienced in childcare, someone who could care for the baby while he balanced his professional responsibilities. But that night, as the baby slept peacefully in the crib nearby, Henry felt an unfamiliar calm. Despite the complexity of the situation, one thing was certain: he would not abandon this child. Something deep in his heart told him the baby had come into his life for a reason, and Henry was determined to protect him, care for him, and ensure he had a future filled with love and security. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered into the house, Henry woke with a clear purpose. He walked over to the crib and gently stroked the baby's soft head as the little one slept soundly. "Son, I promise I'll find someone to care for you while I make sure your future is secure," he whispered with a faint smile. "I promise you'll be okay." Henry made a couple of calls, one to Brenda, his efficient assistant, and another to his attorney. He understood the importance of having everything legally prepared in case someone came forward to claim the child. He wasn't about to take any chances. While waiting for Brenda to arrive, Henry returned to the living room where the baby had started to stir. Every glance at the infant softened Henry's heart a little more. This wasn't just about responsibility anymore. This baby represented everything he had longed for over the years. Soon, Brenda entered the room with her usual air of professionalism and efficiency. If Henry needed something, Brenda was the person who would make it happen. "Brenda, I need your help finding someone trustworthy to care for the baby while I work," he said calmly, cradling the baby in his arms. "Someone experienced and discreet. Brenda nodded immediately. "Of course, sir. I'll make some calls and bring you the best options to choose from." Henry thanked her, confident in her ability to handle the matter. By the end of the day, as night began to fall, Henry sat on the balcony of his mansion, holding the sleeping baby in his arms. The world seemed peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, Henry felt a sense of calm. Across town, in a modest neighborhood, a young woman named Carolyn, just 26 years old, gazed sadly at the tiny room that had been her home for the past few years. Her life had taken a devastating turn when she received the worst news imaginable: cancer. The diagnosis came when she was 5 months pregnant. Her doctor recommended terminating the pregnancy to begin chemotherapy immediately. But Carolyn made a decision that would alter her entire future. "I can't do that to my baby," she thought over and over, tears streaming down her face. The child growing inside her was all she had left, the only source of strength keeping her going. She chose to continue the pregnancy, fully aware that delaying treatment could cost her life. The baby's father had abandoned her when he learned of her illness. With no support system, no mother to lean on, and an uncertain future, Carolyn faced the harshest reality imaginable. As her days dwindled, her pain worsened, and her strength waned. One day, while sitting in the hospital waiting room, Carolyn overheard 2 nurses discussing a powerful and generous man who had founded a charity for people battling cancer. They called him Henry. He had gone through a painful divorce after his wife refused to have children, even though he had longed for a family. Carolyn didn't know him personally, but something about their conversation lit a tiny spark of hope in her heart. Who better to raise her child than a man who had shown so much compassion and love for others? And he had the resources to give her baby a safe and loving life. The thought stayed with her for days. At first, the idea seemed absurd, but as her health deteriorated, it began to feel like the only choice. Carolyn started to research Henry, learning about his grand mansion and his enduring love for children, despite the betrayal he had endured. Could her baby have the future she couldn't provide? The decision was agonizing. Carolyn loved her child more than life itself, and leaving him would be the most painful thing she'd ever face. But her love was so profound that she was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for his well-being. That night, she left her tiny apartment and hailed a cab to the businessman's mansion. It was late, and the streets were eerily quiet. When they arrived, the driver gave her a puzzled glance, but she stepped out without a word. With tears streaming down her face, Carolyn gently placed her baby in a small box near the mansion's entrance. She softly stroked his little head, aware that this was the last moment she'd ever see him. The baby, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, looked at her with innocent eyes, and for a fleeting second, it felt like the world had stopped. "I love you, my little one." "I always will," she whispered with a trembling voice. Then she laid the letter beside him, and, heartbroken, retreated to a hidden spot to wait for Henry's arrival. When he appeared, she watched from the shadows as he stepped out of his car and took the baby into his arms. The pain was overwhelming, but deep down, she knew her child would be in better hands. For Henry, the days that followed were an emotional whirlwind. From the moment he found the baby at his doorstep, something inside him shifted. Despite initially feeling confused, he soon developed a growing sense of responsibility and affection for the child. He realized he couldn't continue living as he had before. His career remained important, but somehow this baby had become the center of his world. 2 days later, Henry sat in his office, gazing out the window at the garden. Outside, Brenda was greeting a woman who had come for a nanny interview. Henry had decided he needed help to balance his work and personal life. While he could manage his business from home, caring for a baby demanded constant attention, and he knew he couldn't do it alone. Brenda peeked into the office, her tone as professional as ever. "Sir, the candidate is here. Shall I send her in?" "Yes, Brenda, let her in," Henry replied, as he stood and adjusted his jacket. The door opened, and a woman in her 40s stepped in. Her demeanor was calm yet confident. She dressed modestly, but her presence exuded experience and assurance. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reynolds. It's a pleasure to meet you," she said, with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming, Diane." "Please have a seat," Henry replied, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "Brenda has spoken highly of you. As you might already know, I'm in a rather unique situation. This little one came into my life unexpectedly, and I want to ensure he gets the best care possible." Diane nodded. "I've heard your story, sir. I understand the responsibility involved, and I have the experience to handle all the baby's needs," she said with conviction. "But I also know that caring for a child requires more than experience. It takes love and dedication, and I am fully committed to providing both." Henry studied her for a moment, reflecting on her words. Something in Diane's expression reassured Henry that she was exactly the person he needed for the job. "This is precisely what I'm looking for. I need someone who can handle these responsibilities with both skill and heart," Henry said in a softer tone. "I'm committed to raising this child as if he were my own, just like the letter left with him said. His mother trusted me, and I won't let her down," Henry declared with firm determination. Diane looked at him, moved by his resolve. "I promise to treat him as if he were my own son, sir. This little boy will have all the care and love he deserves." "Perfect," Henry replied. "I'd like you to start as soon as possible." For the first time in days, he smiled. "Brenda will give you all the details and make sure everything is ready for you to settle in." Diane nodded and stood, eager to begin. "Thank you for trusting me, Mr. Reynolds. You won't regret it." After she left, Henry remained still for a moment, reflecting on the decision he had just made. It was the first step toward reorganizing his life around the baby. While the responsibility felt overwhelming, he knew it was the right path. A few days later, Diane was settled into the mansion, and the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The baby was calmer under Diane's care, and Henry found himself able to focus more on his work. Yet, each day, he spent more time with the child, cherishing moments he never thought he'd experience. "Every day he teaches me something new," Henry shared, looking at the baby with tenderness. "I never imagined I could feel this way about someone so small." "That's what parenthood does," Diane replied with a knowing smile. "It reaches deep into your heart, even when you don't see it coming." Henry acknowledged, moved by her words. "You're right. To think it all started so unexpectedly, but I'm resolved. This child deserves a full life, and I'll do everything in my power to provide it." Just then, the baby let out a cheerful giggle, almost as if he understood the conversation. Henry and Diane exchanged a laugh. "It seems he agrees with you, sir," Diane said, chuckling softly. Henry continued playing with the baby for a while, until the little one began to drift off in his arms. "I'll put him to bed," Henry said gently, cradling him as he walked to the nursery. As he tucked the child in, he whispered, "I'll take care of you, little one. You can count on me." 2 years later, the sound of laughter and children's voices filled the air as colorful balloons decorated the spacious garden of the mansion. It was a bright, sunny day, the perfect setting for celebrating Jesse's 2nd birthday. The little boy, who had unexpectedly entered Henry's life 2 years ago, had since transformed his entire world. Now, Jesse ran around the guests, beaming, his boundless energy lighting up everyone around him. Henry stood a short distance away, his chest swelling with a mix of pride and emotion. They had chosen the name Jessie for its meaning, gift of God, a fitting tribute to the joy he had brought into Henry's life. Every day with him was a reminder of the unexpected blessing life had given him. In the letter left with the baby, his biological mother, Carolyn, had written his birth date, and now, exactly 2 years later, they were celebrating his second birthday. Henry had done everything in his power to surround Jessie with family members who loved and cared for him as their own. The garden was decorated with bright banners and fun shapes, with a long table laden with sweets and a large cake adorned with 2 candles at the center. Jessie could hardly contain his excitement. "It's time for cake," Brenda announced with her usual efficiency, though her voice carried a cheerful tone. Henry joined the group of children gathered around Jessie, some of whom were kids of friends and family. He crouched to the boy's level, meeting his wide, trusting eyes. Jessie was no longer the helpless baby Henry had found that fateful night. He was now a happy, loved child. "Ready to blow out the candles, champ?" Henry asked with a warm smile. "Yes, Daddy," Jessie replied, reaching eagerly for the cake. As the guests began singing Happy Birthday, their voices filling the garden, Henry watched Jessie with profound love. The little boy stood eagerly, excitement shining in his eyes as he prepared to blow out the 2 candles on the cake. When the song ended, Jessie inhaled deeply and blew with all his might, extinguishing the flames to the cheers and applause of the guests. Henry scooped him up, lifting him high so everyone could see his bright, happy smile. "Happy birthday, son," Henry whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to the boy's forehead. Jessie hugged him tightly, resting his small face against Henry's shoulder. In that moment, Henry felt everything in his life fall perfectly into place. This child, who had entered his world in the most unexpected way, was now his greatest treasure. Nothing else mattered. Henry's parents, watching with teary eyes, approached the boy with open arms. His mother gathered Jessie into her embrace, her voice thick with emotion as she murmured, "Sweetheart, we love you so much. You can't imagine how happy you make us." Even Henry's typically reserved father leaned in to gently stroke Jessie's head. With a warm and genuine smile, he added, "You truly are our little miracle." Jessie, nestled in the arms of his grandparents, beamed. Though too young to fully grasp their words, he could feel the love surrounding him. Henry stood back, moved by the scene before him. His parents, who had welcomed Jessie into their lives from the start, loved him as if he were their own grandchild. In their eyes, Henry saw gratitude, a deep thankfulness for the gift life had given them, a reason to love again. "Daddy, look!" Jessie tugged on Henry's hand, breaking his thoughts. Henry smiled, leaving his reflections behind to focus on what truly mattered: the present. Jessie pointed to an enormous, brightly wrapped gift across the room. "Let's open it," he said excitedly. Henry chuckled, letting himself get swept up in his son's enthusiasm. Today, there was no room for worries or lingering questions about the past, only celebration of Jessie's life, the greatest gift he'd ever received. Jessie eagerly tore at the colorful wrapping paper, his small hands struggling to peel it away as Henry helped him. The guests crowded closer, curious to see what was inside. A collective gasp filled the room when the gift was revealed, a shiny red tricycle, perfect for a boy his age. "It's for me?" Jessie exclaimed with a glowing smile, climbing onto the seat immediately. His tiny feet barely reached the pedals. "Of course, champ. It's all yours," Henry said warmly, giving the tricycle a gentle push to start its first ride across the yard. The other children clapped and ran after him, their laughter ringing out as Jessie pedaled unsteadily but joyfully. "Daddy, look at me. I'm riding," the little boy called, his voice bursting with happiness. Henry watched, enjoying his son's innocent delight. Applause and laughter filled the garden, and for a moment, Everything felt perfect. But then, out of the corner of his eye, something caught his attention. A woman stood silently near the edge of the yard. She wasn't a familiar face among the guests, and her presence unsettled Henry. She made no move to approach, but there was something in her expression, an aching sadness mixed with a glimmer of hope that stirred unease within him. Excusing himself quickly, Henry walked toward the stranger, who continued to watch the party from a distance. I wonder which continent on the planet the people listening to this story are from. Is it winter or summer where you are? Leave that information in the comments to let us know, and now I will continue to tell you. Can I help you? He asked politely but firmly. The woman turned to face him, her eyes locking onto his. In that instant, Henry felt a strange connection. Her gaze, though filled with pain, also held something deeper, an overwhelming love. Before he could ask further, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm Carolyn," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm Jesse's mother." Henry's heart stopped for a moment. The woman who had left the baby at his doorstep 2 years ago, disappearing without a trace. She was now standing before him. Suddenly, her anxious expression and the sorrow in her eyes made sense. How is this possible?" Henry asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I know," Carolyn interrupted, her voice breaking. "I know it's hard to understand. I had no choice but to leave him. I was battling cancer and couldn't take care of him. But I survived. By the grace of God and a foundation that helped me, I recovered. I owe everything to them and to you for what you've done for my son. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, but I had to try." Henry sat quietly, processing what Carolyn had just said. Jesse's biological mother had come back, wanting a place in her son's life. "I'm not here to take him from you, Henry," Carolyn explained, her eyes scanning his face, reading the swirl of emotions there. "I know you've been his father all this time, and you've done an amazing job raising him. But I needed to see him. I had to know he's okay." Henry took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Jesse is happy. He's an incredible little boy," he finally said. "You gave him life, and in a way, you did what was best for him by leaving him with me. But now, what is it you're hoping for?" Carolyn glanced down, nervous. "I just want to meet him," she replied. "I'm not sure if there's a place for me in his life anymore, but I feel like I owe it to him, and to myself, to try. I want him to know who I am, but I don't want to hurt him." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she wiped them away. "I just need to see him, to see the life you've given him." Henry felt torn as he looked at Carolyn, seeing both her pain and her hope. He knew this was a complicated situation, but he also knew Jesse deserved to know his own story, his roots. Henry couldn't make a snap decision, but he also couldn't dismiss Carolyn's presence entirely. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself. "This won't be easy," he admitted, "but I can't deny your right to see him. Let's talk about this," he said, calmer now. "We'll need to prepare Jesse for this meeting. It can't be sudden. He needs to understand. Protecting him and handling this the right way for his sake has to be our priority." Carolyn looked at him with gratitude, her eyes a mix of relief and emotion. "Thank you, Henry. I don't expect anything beyond getting to meet him. I don't want to disrupt his life or cause him confusion." Henry nodded. "We'll take it slow," he assured her. "We'll start by talking about you, little by little, and when he's ready, he can meet you. But I'm not promising it'll be easy. All I ask from you is patience." Turning back to the party, Henry saw Jesse playing and laughing, completely unaware of the life-altering conversation that had just taken place. Henry paused, watching his son, his mind working through how to navigate this challenge. A few days later, while playing in the backyard, Henry sat beside Jesse. "There's something I want to tell you," he began gently, as Jesse busied himself with his toys. "There's someone very special who wants to meet you. Someone who has cared about you since the day you were born." Jesse looked up, curiosity flickering in his eyes as he continued to fiddle with his blocks. "Who, Dad?" he asked. Henry smiled softly. "It's your biological mother, the person who gave you life. She wasn't able to be with you before because she was very sick, but she's better now and would like to meet you, if you're ready." Jesse frowned slightly, processing the new information. Henry didn't push, giving him time to think. Several days passed before the meeting was arranged, only after Henry was sure Jesse felt comfortable with the idea. The first meeting was set in their backyard, a place where Jesse felt safe. Carolyn stood just outside the house she had only ever seen from a distance. This time she wasn't just an observer. Henry stepped outside to greet her, holding Jesse's hand tightly. When the boy saw Carolyn, he froze, unsure of how to react. Carolyn's eyes filled with tears, but her expression radiated tenderness. Henry kneeled down beside his son. "Jesse, this is Carolyn. She's your mum." Jesse stared at her, not saying a word, his small face a mixture of curiosity and a budding understanding of the moment. Carolyn crouched to his level, her smile trembling. "Hi, Jesse," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "It's such a privilege to meet you. I've missed you every single day." At first, Jesse didn't respond, but then, hesitantly, he let go of Henry's hand and stepped closer to Carolyn. She held back her tears, watching the boy she had left with Henry 2 years ago. Seeing him up close for the first time since that night stirred a whirlwind of emotions in her. Jesse, though confused, looked at her as if searching for something familiar. Finally, he took another step forward and, without a word, wrapped his small arms around her neck. Carolyn held him gently, feeling the broken pieces of her heart begin to heal in that moment. Jesse, resting his head gently on her shoulder, whispered softly, his voice full of hope. "Mom, are you better now? Can you stay with us?" Carolyn couldn't hold back the tears streaming down her face, but she smiled and hugged him even tighter. "Yes, my love," she replied, stroking his hair gently. "I'm better now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you." Still nestled in his mother's embrace, Jesse turned to Henry with a bright smile. "Dad, now we'll be a family, right?" Henry smiled warmly and walked closer to them. Jesse, filled with innocent joy, repeated, "Dad, we'll be a family now, right? Mom and you?" Henry returned his smile, but knew he had to be honest without breaking his little boy's heart. "Yes, sweetheart," Henry said softly. "But your mom has her own home." Jesse frowned, his face clouding with sadness. "But I want to live with both my mum and Dad," he said quietly. Henry sighed, looking at him with affection as he gently stroked his hair. "I understand, buddy, but that's not possible. Your mum and I want what's best for you and we'll always be here to take care of you, even if we live in different houses." Jesse nodded slowly, though his heart was not fully content with the answer. He stayed wrapped in his mother's arms a little longer, savoring the warmth he hadn't felt in so long. When it was time to leave, Carolyn stood up, holding Jesse's hand as they prepared to go. Henry, with a kind smile, approached her. "Can I take you home?" he asked. Carolyn hesitated, looking down before responding. "Actually, I'm staying at a shelter right now. After my illness, I lost everything. I don't have a job," she admitted, pausing to take a deep breath. "I was going to ask if you could give me some work, something to help me get back on my feet." Henry gazed at her quietly, processing her words. The vulnerability in her eyes moved him, and an idea quickly formed in his mind. "I have a suggestion," he said finally. "How about you stay with us? You can help me with Jesse and be close to him at the same time." Carolyn looked at him, stunned, tears of relief welling up in her eyes. "Are you serious? You'd really let me do that?" she asked. "Of course," Henry replied with a gentle smile. "It'll be best for our son, and for you too. This way, you can spend time with him and I'll get the help I need." Hearing this, Jesse released his mother's hand and began jumping with excitement. "Yes! Yes! Mum's staying with us!" he shouted joyfully, his face lit up with pure happiness. Carolyn, overwhelmed, couldn't stop her tears as she saw her son's joy. "Thank you," she whispered to Henry, unable to believe the kindness unfolding before her. Henry smiled as he watched Jesse run around them, unable to contain his excitement. In that moment, he felt certain this was the right choice for everyone. Though challenges lay ahead, this marked the beginning of a new chapter for all three of them. Over time, life together became more natural. Carolyn, now fully recovered, immersed herself in caring for Jesse and supporting Henry in any way she could. What began as a partnership rooted in respect and gratitude for Jesse's well-being soon deepened into something more profound. Henry, who had closed his heart after a painful marriage, began to see Carolyn as a strong, courageous woman full of love. Similarly, Carolyn found not only unwavering support in Henry, but also a man of great integrity who shared her deep love for Jesse. Jesse, delighted to see the two most important people in his life in perfect harmony, witnessed their bond grow stronger each day. Family moments became more frequent and meaningful, until one sunny afternoon in the garden, where it had all started, Henry took Carolyn's hand, looked into her eyes, and made her a proposal. "Carolyn, we've walked a path neither of us could have imagined. You've brought life back to this house and shown me what unconditional love truly is. I want us to be together, not just as Jesse's parents, but as partners forever. Will you marry me?" Overwhelmed with emotion, Carolyn couldn't do anything but nod. Wrapped in joyful hugs and laughter, Jesse beamed with excitement as Carolyn accepted. In a small, heartfelt ceremony filled with love and happiness, Henry and Carolyn tied the knot, beginning a life together as a true family. For Jesse, it was a dream come true, his mom and dad together at last. The house that had once been Henry's alone was now filled with laughter, love, and a happiness he never thought possible. Fate had brought these three souls together at the most unexpected time, and together they discovered the true meaning of family. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.